Today, we're going to be taking a look at Baserow, an open-source database management tool that has some striking similarities to Airtable. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from AutomationHelpers.com, and we help companies like yours get automated with portals, apps, and integrations. In this video, we're going to take a look at Baserow in its own right, but we'll also compare it to Airtable. For many of you are using Airtable, and you might be looking for an alternative. Now, the first thing that we notice on the landing page for Baserow is that they've started to remove a lot of the Airtable intensive branding. They're trying to be their own thing, create it, scale it, own it. So I like the direction this is going, at least from a marketing standpoint, to start to separate themselves just from being an Airtable alternative. Let's briefly dig into the pricing a little bit. And they've got a few different options. One is that you can cloud host it with them. This is going to be a similar setup to Airtable, where you're just using Airtable directly. In this case, you're using Baserow directly, hosted on their servers. So you don't have to worry about anything technical for the setup. But where a lot of people get really excited about the potential of Baserow is that you can self-host this. This is open source. You can find the GitHub repo and you can install it a number of different ways yourself. The beauty of the self-hosted option is that in this always free version of it for open source, you can see that you're allowed not just unlimited databases, but also unlimited rows and unlimited storage. Because this kind of follows the idea that if you're going to host it on your own infrastructure, you can scale up the resources that you need to be able to handle as many rows as you need. So this is going to be one of the key reasons that people choose Baserow, is because it's open source, because you can self-host, and because you can scale it beyond the record limits that are traditionally associated with Airtable. Now, on both the cloud-hosted and the self-hosted plan, you want to move up in terms of feature set, and you're still going to be paying for it. So remember, there's a difference between open source and free and open source. There's still a monetization model here if you want some additional features. What's a little bit disappointing to me is that they're charging for things like Kanbans and for calendars, and those things are just really basic in my mind. They just go along with basic usage of the application. You can see it's the same thing here on the cloud-hosted plans, that they're restricting some of those views. And I don't know, that just kind of rubs me the wrong way, but they're going to make money somehow, so this is one way of doing it. Another thing to notice about their pricing as opposed to Airtable's is that they're limiting the rows based on the workspace and not on the base or database. So you get more rows here, you get 10,000 rows per workspace, but that's at the workspace level. And so if you have lots of different databases in this case, or bases in Airtable, you might hit that quickly. So it's just kind of a different way of looking at it. But I would say in general, the row limits are more generous here. If we scroll down here, we can see a complete breakdown of all the features. Storage, of course, is going to be another one of those that you'll get increased storage as you go up your plans, as well as the auditing or the row change history to see what's happened to those different records. It doesn't always make sense to me which features go in which tier. I would think of things like snapshots and webhooks being something that could be a premium feature, but I wouldn't put calendar as a premium feature. So it doesn't quite make sense to me in my pricing product-y kind of mind, but if it works for you, it works for you. The other thing that drives me nuts here is getting down to a field level for your pricing table. If you're getting down to a field level to say which fields are individually available, that means you're not really talking about the value that you're giving organizations. So again, this is just me harping on pricing a little bit, but I wouldn't get down to a field level if you're trying to convey what value you're providing as an organization. And the last thing that seems goofy to me is that there's several different admin features, and you're like, wait, they're not available on any of the plans? But that's because there's that difference between cloud-hosted and self-hosted. So if we go over to self-hosting and we scroll down to the admin section here, then we can see that all of those are available. So I don't know, an instance-wide admin panel only being on self-hosted, or single sign-on only on self-hosted, or invoicing, that seems kind of strange to me that there's this special class of enterprise self-hosted that's not available on the cloud-hosted, even if you're going to pay money for it. So I don't know, but that's their choice that they're going with right now. And I would say that they are much more known for their self-hosted plans than they are for the cloud solution, at least at this point in time. When you get logged into the application for the first time, this is what you're presented with. It's pretty minimalistic. The first thing that you see is information about the consumption of your plan. You can see the subscription that you're currently on. We've got all this stuff in our left-hand navigation panel here, our notifications, the ability to invite people and have members. And then here's where we start to see the database information down on the lower left-hand corner. In this video, we're going to focus mostly on the features, and we're going to be doing that through the cloud-hosted plan. But our team at Automation Helpers of Developers can help you either way, whether you want to self-host or you want to be able to use the cloud plan. So when you get logged in, you're just going to have a simple database here, and there's probably just two tables if it's anything like mine. We've got customers and we've got our projects. And in these tables, it's going to feel really similar to Airtable in terms of being able to add different fields. It feels like a spreadsheet in this grid. You can click and make any changes that you want. You can sort, group, filter, you can share our views. It really feels like a minimalist version of Airtable. And for a lot of people, it kind of brings back this nostalgic feeling of Airtable from the earlier days when most of the time we were using grid views and we didn't have quite as many options and there were no interfaces. And so it kind of brings back a lot of those memories, which feels good in a way, but it's really interesting to see where are they going with their own direction. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can create new databases in the application here. So we can click on Create New. We've got a couple of options, Database Application, which is kind of exciting, and we'll talk about in a little bit. And we can also choose from a template. So if we choose from a template, they've got a lot of different options, and they're broken down into different categories, different industries, different niches. And so here we can see we've got a project tracker, and we can click into something like content marketing and see advertising campaigns. You can take a look at the different tables. You could look at the different views that are available. So I like how easy this is to be able to interact with these templates before actually selecting one for ourselves. Now, many of you presumably might be coming over from Airtable. So another really handy thing we can do is do Create New, and we'll choose Database. And from here, there's an option to import from Airtable. So I'm really curious the mechanism that they're using here to access the data. My first gut would be that they're actually web scraping. We just give them a public view and they're scraping it and they're dumping it in. The reason I think that is because this doesn't work with formula lookup and count. So any of our computed fields, they're not able to do, which makes me think that they're just kind of pulling the front end, the text with it, because they can't get access to the metadata. In any case, let's give it a try. So here we have a project management base in Airtable. We're going to click Share up here, and we'll use this Share Publicly. We'll grab this link, and then we'll drop the link here in Baserow and click on Import from Airtable. Okay, it might take a minute here or so, and then we can click to open our imported database. And now you can see we have the tables. It pulled everything across. I'm really impressed that not only were they able to get general field data, but we could also take the files. That all got pulled in as well. So there were a number of different images that we can see. It created our linked records automatically for us. Those can open up. So it's pretty impressive how well this worked. So let's talk about some different views here. I'm going to click on my tasks, and up at the top, we can see we've got a grid view right now, and presumably we want to create some additional ones. We've got grid, gallery, form, Kanban, and calendar. Now, if you remember, some of these like Kanban and calendar are restricted depending on the plan that you're on, which I don't love, but it's the way it is. Let's create a Kanban from this. We can give it a name and determine whether it's collaborative or a personal view. And in this case, let's create our different lanes by the status. And here's what I don't really understand. When I created it by status, it didn't actually do anything. It put them all in this uncategorized. And in Airtable, I had all of my status fields updated. So then in taking a look at my data in the grid view, it turns out that our single selects, the role and the status here, didn't actually import. So I'm really curious to be able to import our linked record fields and to be able to import images. That's so powerful. I don't really understand why it broke when it happened to get to single selects and multi-selects here. So a little bit strange, but something we can easily fix. And as you'd expect, then we can click and drag these between different statuses here, and we can use this as we would expect a Kanban. Let's try a different view here. If we click on people, let's create a gallery. And in our gallery, I think we can make this a little bit more visual. So let's click and customize our cards. And for our cover, we're going to choose our photo. Instantly, this looks much better here. And we'll turn off availability, add their role, and add their bio. Now we've got a really visual way to see the people in our company, and we can click on a record and see more information about them. Now, what if we want to create a form to collect information about people? We could certainly do that as well. Click on a form. The form builder is going to feel very similar in a way to Airtable's own form builder. We've got some conditional logic that we can do. The thing that's interesting here is they have a mode, and you can choose between form and survey, which Baserow kind of classifies as two different kinds of views. If we click on survey, this really means that we're looking at one field at a time. That's what they mean by survey. So we could add a name, and then after our name, we could add I don't know, information about their role. So what this is doing is you're actually clicking next to progress through it. It kind of feels like Typeform or something like that here. I'm not sure what that has to do with a survey as opposed to a form. I would think there'd be a little bit more disambiguation there, but it's cool that they're doing something that's different from Airtable in this regard. So I'd say kudos, keep working on some of those innovations that continue to separate things a little bit from the direction that Airtable's going. The beautiful thing about open source companies that have everything in GitHub is you can see a really nice roadmap of what's coming down the lane here. So timeline view is actually next on the roadmap. We've got analytics, dashboards, data syncing. Some of these nice features are coming out. PDF Designer, we're excited to see those. They've got some features around Application Builder. We'll dig into that, but this is kind of akin to interfaces and core features as well. So if this is of interest to you, you can get even more granular here because you can view a detailed roadmap, takes you over to GitHub, and you can see exactly what's being worked on. Now, when it comes to fields in the application, you'll see that it feels really, really similar to Airtable. Almost all of them map over pretty directly here. There's some nuances that don't feel quite as fleshed out, like we don't have a currency field, but we have a number field. If we edit that, we have decimal places, but we can't actually choose a currency or any text that comes after that. The link to table field, if we edit this, we don't actually have the ability to say whether it's a one-to-many or many-to-one or many-to-many or one-to-one type relationship. You're just creating the link between the two. Now, thankfully, they're actually creating the link on both sides as you'd expect. So if we put it on customers, it's also on projects. But you can't say, hey, I only want the ability to select one customer here. It's going to give you the ability to add more. You can't actually restrict that for the user. So that to me is kind of a pain. One more thing about the link to table field is that there's no way to actually link across different databases that you have. You're simply linking to other tables within your same database. Now, one field I really do appreciate are their formula fields and the way that they handle it. It's really nice to be able to see a list of our fields and all the functions that we have here. There's some pretty sophisticated functions, including certain ones that aren't available in Airtable or Smart Suite today. So we can see some information about file types. You can detect if it's an image. I mean, there's just some really cool things that you can do, as well as several different functions that you're going to be expected within Airtable that are here as well. One addition to the formula field that I think is really powerful, and this is kind of in line with what Smart Suite is doing, is that you have the ability to pull a lookup. This is information from a related table, and then use that in the context of your formula. So in this case, I was able to say, do a lookup from our customer table and pull the hourly rate from that customer and then multiply that by the number of hours. Now, I don't love some of the extra syntactical stuff we have to do here, like put this field wrapper around the field itself. That seems a little bit excessive, but I really do like that we can do this with the lookups, because if I'm saying, hey, pull the hourly rate from the customer table and multiply this to get a budget, we can do that with one field rather than having to do a lookup field and then take the lookup field and multiply it across. So this is going to save you several additional fields that you don't even need to create. Now, Smart Suite and Monday, in my opinion, do a far better job than Airtable does. It doesn't require all this additional syncing. You can just link to different boards or link to different tables across your different databases. But Airtable does have its two-way syncing or one-way syncing, depending on which plan you're on, to be able to pull information from different bases. Because there's not that ability today, you're kind of locked into having everything you need be in one database. Next, let's talk about some recent innovations that have come to Baserow. One is going to be the start of their own AI functionality. So if we click here to add a new field, we'll see an option for an AI prompt. We don't have a whole lot of options here. When we choose our AI type, we have Baserow, and it's going to default us to GPT 3.5. And then in the prompt, the nice part that we can do is that we can refer to the other fields that we have. So we could add our own static text to create a prompt and then insert fields like our customer. But that's about it for Baserow's AI. You might be curious to check out our video on Airtable's AI features as well. The other interesting thing that launched is Baserow's application builder. So instead of doing create new and clicking on a database, you can now create an application. This is going to be akin to Airtable's interfaces, but it has some distinct advantages and disadvantages. Building an application at this point in time is quite a bit more complex than building an interface. Right off the bat, it creates a 2-page application to give you an idea of what this might look like. We want to connect this to a data source that we have. So we can click on data, and we need to add a data source. So let's do that by clicking this button. We'll just call this Baserow for now. And to select a service, we can basically tell it, do we want a list of things that we want to show several rows, or do we just want a single object like a customer record? So in this case, let's grab a list. And for our integration, we're going to choose from local Baserow. Now we can choose our database. So we can choose from customer data or project management. We'll choose customer data. We can choose our table. We'll choose customers. And we could pull from a specific view that we've created as well. Or if you don't want to pull from a view you already created, you could add your own filters, sorts, or even search queries to be able to pull information from those records. In this case, we'll just grab all of our customer records, so I don't need to add any filters. And now we can click on an element, and we'll see this plus button here, so we can add an element underneath this. You can see here are the options that are currently available to us. We've got some static things like heading, text, we've got images, we could have iframes from other websites, some links and buttons. Tables will obviously be a big one. We can structure data in different columns, have forms, text input, drop-downs, checkbox, and logins. So it's definitely a good start for some basic functionality. I expect this will be something that they'll continue to develop as they go along. Let's plug this data into a table. And here's what's kind of a unique experience from my perspective is that in order to connect this to our data, we need to choose that data source that we just created, Baserow, and we can tell it how many of those customer records that we want. But then we have to go and map our values ourselves. So Airtable interfaces is quite a bit more intuitive. We're just pulling from the data that we already have, the fields. This is really saying, hey, go grab data and then pull it in. And now we need to custom map it on our own in order for that to display. So here we wouldn't call it column 1. We'd change that to name, and then we choose between whether it's text or a link. And then the value could be static data if we wanted to, but that wouldn't make sense here. So let's delete that out. But here's where now we have our data source, and we can choose from our different properties. So in this case, we would choose name. And now that name and all of the corresponding names of those customers appear. Same thing here in column 2. We could put last name. So I guess the first one would be first name. And then here we would choose that next value of last name. Now, in Baserow's own example, they did pretty much the same thing. So they've got a table of customers, and then they also plugged in a form to let you actually create a new record on the fly. So we can click into any of these elements, like our table here, and we could do different things from a stylistic standpoint. We can choose the visibility settings here. This starts to feel a little bit like softer in my perspective. So we can say this is available to all visitors, logged in visitors, or logged out visitors. And this is what I'm really excited about because I don't know exactly what's coming out, but if they already have functionality to limit visibility, then it almost feels like we're going to get our own mini software inside of Baserow, which could provide some additional functionality outside of what Airtable does with interfaces because they're trying so hard to restrict so only people who are fully licensed can access what's inside of an interface. So this might end up being one of those true competitive advantages for Baserow. Now, if you have an element like a form or a button, then you're also going to have events. So what happens when you submit a form or click a button? Then you'll have these events and you can expand it and you can see, oh, we're going to show a notification. We're going to actually push this information into our database that we've created. And so that's essentially the basis of creating our applications. Now, if I want to publish this for the first time, I can click on publish, but it says you need to have at least one domain in order to publish your application. Why you wouldn't link to the area to add your domain is beyond me. But we can click on this menu for our client portal and we can go to settings. From settings, we can see this first option for domains and we can add a new domain here. And you can add your own custom domain or a subdomain. So we'll keep it simple now with sample. I'm also pretty excited when we talk about different data sources to add because I'm curious if they'll make it easy to be able to integrate with other applications that you could just pull other data from an API and render it to pages of your own application. That would be pretty cool. So I don't know exactly what's coming here, but I think that might be a possibility as well. For our users for our application, we can set this up ourselves and create it. And so you can actually choose your own table of contacts. Again, very much like software here. So it doesn't have to be fully paid users. These can be external people like your clients or contractors. So I really think this is going to be the most exciting part about Baserow as they go forward. Once you publish your site, you can click on your application link and you'll be able to start using your application. Let's try adding some data with our form here. And you can see we have this success message. And if we refresh our page, we can see we now have this test user appended at the bottom. Now, this certainly isn't the most aesthetic application. These features just came out in the past week or so, but I'm excited to see the potential of where this is going. So beyond the application builder, what else is unique? Well, we can click on the audit log here, and this is a crazy powerful audit log. You can see all of these different event types. So what you can do is you can choose a certain user and you can see what they've done within the application. So this is really loved by IT teams. You can look and you can segment this down. So you can see, hey, who assigned multiple roles? Or did someone delete users? Did they create a snapshot? Did they create users? And you can subscribe to all of these events too. So you can use this in other applications. You can export this to CSV. So it's really insane. They're making available just about everything that happens in the application. Hey, here's all the views that Dan created between these different dates. So this gets really, really granular. Now, the other beautiful part about being open source is that you can create your own plugins that you want to extend the functionality of Baserow. So in Airtable, if there's a certain field type that's not available and you want to make it available, tough, you're out of luck. You can't do anything about it. In Baserow, you could add your own custom field types. You could add your own custom view types. You could make your own formula functions. You could change the way that the application looks or how it integrates. There's so much that you can do with plugins. This is only going to be available if you self-host. So if you're using the cloud-hosted version, you're not going to be able to get the plugin functionality. But chances are, if you're a developer, you're probably more interested in the self-hosted version anyways. Baserow's APIs are really well documented. You can click on a database that you have. You can see how to authenticate and your different tables, the fields of your tables that you've created, how to create rows, update rows, moving rows or ordering them is unique. Being able to upload files is pretty cool. It's very well documented. Feels pretty similar to Airtable. I really hope this is an area that they continue to invest in to make it even more powerful. Airtable likes to segment off parts of their API only to enterprise customers. So if you want to do things with your users, provision new users, it would be really awesome if that was available in Baserow on all the plans, but we'll see where this goes. Now, one thing that does feel missing in Baserow is automations. Airtable obviously has a really powerful automation builder. Now, that's not to say we can't do anything automation-oriented with Baserow, but it means you're going to be much more dependent on webhooks and building out the functionality yourself. So here you can see for any table, we've got webhooks. We can create our own webhooks, and here's the information so we can see, when's a record updated, when it's created, then we want to kick off other actions. Now, you could certainly do that with Make or with Zapier, but certainly the most used automation tool with Baserow is going to be N8N. One of the reasons that it's so popular is because they have a community edition, which you can self-host, similar to Baserow. When might Baserow be a good fit for you? If you're looking to lower your Airtable spend, you're most certainly going to do that with Baserow, regardless of if you're on the cloud or self-hosted plans. If you found yourself needing access to more records than Airtable allows, again, this is going to be a really good option for you to self-host Baserow. If you love open source and hosting your own applications and building your own plugins, Baserow is going to be right up your alley. And if you've been using Airtable with Softer, you might be able to do it with the application builder in Baserow. It's not quite ready today, but in the future, I bet it will be. These are all great reasons why Baserow might be the next application for you. The main downside, I'd say, for Baserow is that they're really copying a lot of the functionality, but not quite with the same level of attentiveness around design that Airtable has. So Airtable builds these fields and views, and we get most of them in Baserow. Airtable launches with AI, and Baserow comes up with a smaller version of similar AI. Airtable makes their interfaces, and Baserow comes out with a V1 of their application builder. You're always kind of getting the downstream features from Airtable. Now, how strongly you feel about that innovation versus cost savings is up to you. If you have any questions about your own no-code or automation project, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.